Hi, this is Merlin Rocket again. My name is Jon Turner, and I'm going to try and introduce you to a few easy methods and key points on maintaining your boat, looking after it so it's a fine racing machine. The first thing I'd like to show you is the centreboard removal and replacement technique. This is key because most people don't like taking a centreboard out, and it's an understandable thing because it is a pain in the neck to do, especially getting it back in. So this method is what we use all the time, and I assure you it will work nicely for you. What we do is get a felt tip pen, make sure that the centreboard is housed. So if you make sure that it's on the fully up position, and if it isn't, that won't matter, just make sure that you've got a datum. What we're going to do now is I'm going to put a felt tip mark along here. Now it will be on the centreboard, and I'm going to put a piece of tape along this edge so I don't deface this beautiful boat that I'm working on. Just a bit of tape. You could use masking tape and run it along the head area. So this is the area of the foil that's in the centreboard case always, and I'm just going to put this along this edge. So for the purpose of doing the work, you then put a line along the centreboard that completely matches with that tape line. The next thing you do is you do a transverse line like so, and another one here like so, and for good measure you can double it up in case you smudge it. The main thing is that the points coincide. That's all that matters. Leave that for 10 minutes, so don't get impatient, because if you try taking it out now, there's every chance that you'll smudge the marks you've just put on, and the accuracy of the marks is paramount to success. After 10 minutes, you can then remove the centreboard, and when you want to put it back in, those marks will be there hard and fast. Get it back into the boat, get it into the same position once you've entered it. However you put it into the slot is your choice, but lining up to get this bolt in is the key difficulty. This will overcome that. Now we have the marks in place, we remove the centreboard bolt down here, which is an 8mm bolt, by slackening the nut the other side and then removing the pin. When we've taken the pin out, it's a really good idea to check the quality of the seals, because this is below the waterline level, and in light air, if the seals are at all damaged, you'll find that you're getting water ingress from that, and you may not notice it, but it's a nice thing to try and keep the boat completely dry when it's light air, and that's one of the key leak points. With the bolt out, we now remove these fastenings or remove the rope control. The choice is yours. I tend to take these out, so I leave the rope control in place, and then we slide the boat back on its trolley as far as we can get it, and put a support structure at the back end so that the boat is now loosely supported on a trolley, but there's room behind the main support to allow the centreboard to drop. We use the covers again now this time. We put the covers on the ground behind the trolley, and then lifting this part of the centreboard, it comes up, allowing it to drop down, and then we draw it out. Obviously with the mast up it would be somewhat more difficult right now, but that's how we would take it out. To return it, we do exactly the same. Put the boat in the same guise, a long way back on the trolley with a support under the transom, slip it into the box, slide it down, and then as you get closer to these marks, you move it around, and then you can put these blocks back on to help you if they help you get it into position. Move it around until such times as these lines are marked up. Then get a small spike or screwdriver and insert in the bolt hole. You'll find it's magically right there when these are lined up. Then move it around and get the bolt and slowly wind it into position. Tighten the nut up and the job's complete. Now, no matter how accurately we set the spreaders, that will be flawed if there's any rotation in the mast here, and this is not very much, okay? But what will happen with wear and tear is that this sits on a tenon in a slot, and as it wears, this will become more capable. You can see there's a small amount of rotation there already. You won't notice it in actual reality when you're sailing, but it does have a big effect on the spreaders. You can see them moving up there now if you take a shot of that. And that's with the smallest amount of rotation here. Most boats have got far worse. Now this is a relatively new boat with a low amount of wear. There are other mast steps available, and you can cure this by making sure that your tenon is tighter in this Mast Tenon system, and there are other ones available if you prefer to use those. But that's key to setting the boat up. No matter how precisely we set the spreaders, if that's rotating, it makes a fallacy of it. The next things to be wary of is wear and tear, and really and truly, gear failure is the fault of the operator, and it's a hard one to take because we like to blame the thing for breaking, but in actual fact it's our fault for not maintaining it well enough. So gear failure isn't like having a puncture. A puncture is where you pick up something and it punctures your tyre even though it's in good condition. And 9 times out of 10 gear failure is a wear and tear issue. Not always, but 9 times out of 10 it's a wear and tear issue. That is no excuse for not completing the race. So you have to be sure that everything is reliable. And that means meticulously testing everything. Whenever you've trailed the boat, it's the worst time for things to come undone. If you imagine when you're driving down the motorway at the legal speed limit, or above maybe, actually resting yourself inside the boat and think what the trip's like for the boat. It's pretty ugly in there. It's not like it is in your car, nice and comfortable. That jostling around and shaking affects every part of your boat, the structure and all of the assembled parts inside. So when you get to the venue that you're going to go to, instead of just leaving the boat parked up or just throwing the mast up and wanting to go sailing, make sure you've got enough time to check every fitting on the mast to begin with. The mast has been shaken around on top of the boat and in the wind as well. It hadn't had the benefit of the covers. So what will happen is the spreaders can come loose, the spreader bolts can come loose, the pins can come loose from the sheaves, the attachment for the sheaves can all come loose. It's important you do a top-down inspection of the rig before you put it up. Even the gooseneck, you can lose the pin out of here if you don't check it because of the nature of towing. The same goes for the boom. Inspect every element on it that it's all functioned properly, and then do the same with the boat. Take all of the sails out of the boat so there's nothing in it. Go all over the boat checking every part of it as thoroughly as you can, and then you're safe to go sailing, and not until then. Another element that's overlooked quite a lot is the rudder fittings. So these pins don't wear too badly as a rule, but the bushes within, and the same on the rudder will have a bush in it, will wear, and that will give you backlash. Now that backlash is going to affect your sensitivity whilst you're sailing. As would be, an analogy would be, if you were driving your car down the road at 100 miles an hour and there was slack in the steering between the steering straight, it would make it quite difficult to steer straight. That's an easy job. When you're trying to balance your boat, half the sense of the feel of the boat for the helmsman is coming through the tiller. So it's absolutely paramount that the rudder system is in really good condition, and these pins in particular are. So the golden rule is here, never attach your number plate to these fittings. They're not for that, they're for hanging a sensitive rudder on. If you want to put the number board on the back of the boat, do it on the cover, some other means. Do not use these. Another key point in boat maintenance is thorough washing down, and not just at the end of a race. That's not quite so important, but it is important through a period of time that the boat is going to be idle, even if it's 24 hours. You must be sure there's no salt on the boat anywhere, so thorough hosing down. And if you've had the misfortune of capsizing at some time, which most of us do, you may have got ingress into the tanks. Now what would have happened is you'd have emptied it out. If there's any water at all in the tank, I can guarantee you that'll be salt water. It won't be fresh if you've been sailing on the sea. What you must do is wash that tank out with fresh water. Otherwise you've got salt in there for months, nay on years maybe, which is not going to do anything any good, but worse than any, it'll hold moisture. Salt has a tendency to cling on to moisture, and that's why it's really important to wash thoroughly. So underneath the decks, all the lines, all the lineage, thorough soap and water wash, the tanks at least once a year, a soap and water wash, and then an absolute thorough dry out. This will keep your boat in really good condition, and it will keep it down on minimum weight. That salt build-up in the tanks, on all the surfaces, the surface area of the boat is enormous, especially when you take the tanks into consideration. The undersides of the deck, underneath all of these areas here where we tend to turn a blind eye, paramountly important that you keep it spotlessly clean. Okay, another nicety, if you don't have a lazy guy system, and even if you do, you may well use a stopper knot to restrict the amount of sheet that can pass out of the boat. So if you have a stopper knot on the spinnaker sheets, it's important that you don't use that. So a bobble such as that is hard. That means it can fall into the bottom of the boat anywhere, and foam sandwich boats are not very good at taking a point loading. So if you stand on that, you'll do far more damage than you realise, and you can't actually see the damage you're doing, but you're breaking down the structure because every impact it has forms a very miniature shear fracture in the construction. So the more of these you get, the more likely you are to get a soft panel in the boat. So don't use one of those, use a knot, and then better than just a knot on its own is to use a tap washer. Now the reason people would use that bobble would be to stop it passing through a turning block. Now if you use a tap washer, you've got a flat face that will be behind the knot. When it comes and rests against the turning block, which is hard for me to demonstrate here at the moment looking around, it will not enter the sides of the block because it's got a flat surface. A knot can ease its way into the turning block, which is why people like to use these. And then if a knot can get in, what it will do is it will spread the block, and you can get a failure of the block because it spreads. Go back to the tap washer idea, you can tread on it, it doesn't break your block, and it's super effective.